Hello, Frank from the Old Town Coleman Center. Welcome to part one of my three-part series on how to rebuild a Coleman 2 or 3 burner camp stove. In this first video, I'm going to show you how to take your stove completely apart so we can go to the second video where you'll have a lot more fun cleaning your greasy old Coleman stove. Coleman's been making stoves for 100 years now. The Coleman No.1 right in front of me is an early model and it was made in 1923. And the stove just to the left of it is a late model No.2 and it was made in 1924. These 10 stoves represent every gasoline powered Coleman stove that has ever been made. Up to and including the $180 Guide Series 424 stove that Coleman's still making today. And that also includes your stove. It doesn't matter which Coleman gas stove you have, you'll be able to use this video to help rebuild it. But before I get started, there are a few things I'd like to cover. The first one is the safety issue. We're going to be working on a system that has gasoline a few inches away from fire, and that is inherently dangerous. If you're not comfortable doing this type of work, I ask that you don't. Put it in a box and send it to Coleman, and for $55, they'll repair it and send it right back to you. You don't have to deal with this do-it-yourself stuff. Always have a fire extinguisher near you. Know that it's working and know exactly where it is. Always light your stove outside and always expect the unexpected. That way, when it happens, you're going to be ready for it. Today's video, I'm going to be using common tools that you probably already have around the house and standard household cleaners. There'll be nothing special here other than a check valve tool, and we'll cover that when we get to it. The one thing I do encourage you to do before you start this rebuild is take a lot of pictures of your stove. That way, when you're done, you'll be able to look back to make sure that you have everything in the right position. The screws are all going the right way, and you'll have a reference to go back and look at if you forgot how something goes back together. So I conducted an online survey to find out which stove you wanted me to rebuild. I gave you the choice of 5 of these stoves, and the overwhelming favorite was the 426B in the front, probably because it's the most greasy. We should have a lot of fun with that. So go get something to drink, watch my intro, and while you're doing that, I'll take that 426B over to the workbench where we can get started. I'll be right back. Welcome back. All right, here she is, this old greasy monster. We'll get the camera in here, it'll let you look around inside and see how dirty it is. This is actually a pretty fair representation of what you would find at a yard sale or a thrift store. I think it was $3, maybe $5 for this stove. And you can see it's been used a lot. It's been stored where it was wet. It is really greasy, really dirty, and well, the amount of cleanliness you get when you're done all depends on how much work you're willing to put into it. What we're going to do now is I'm going to start with the tank, and I will put the case aside. We'll take the tank all apart, and then we will bring the case back and we'll tear it all apart. Okay, I've not touched this stove. I know that the pump and everything's loose. I know the valve's working. I know the lighting lever's working. I also know that the filler cap is stuck, and this is something you might have to deal with, so it's okay that this has happened to me. So the insert is stuck to the top of the fount, and before I break it free, what I'm going to do is try to loosen the center screw on there. That can be kind of difficult to do sometimes. Yep, come right out. Just like a lantern, when I'm rebuilding them, I like to put all the parts in a box so I know where they are and I don't lose anything. Okay, next I'm going to take off the valve wheel. Next I'm taking off is the pump. This type of pump has a clip on it. You might have one that has a couple of small screws on the side. If you do, just take those off. But on this pump clip, just stick a screwdriver in the side and you can remove it real easy. Now the pump cap is this piece here, and that is what fastens onto the tank. Sometimes that'll get a lot of oil and grease on it and be really hard to get it off. This one's going to come right out, but if you have to, you can lay your screwdriver under there and just pry it off all the way around and she'll come off. But the pump's ready to come out, and there's your pump. It's in pretty good shape. This, of course, has a leather pump cup, and the leather is still pliable. I don't see any rips in it, so we do not need to replace the pump cup on this. Next is our check valve, which is inside. If you have issues with your check valve, there is another video I have on how to pull this out, and you can also find the instructions at oldtowncoleman.com. And this is what a check valve looks like. You see it's got a slot on there. You can, stick a well-fitting screwdriver down there and try to pull it out. You can put a screw extractor in there and remove it, or you can put in a check valve tool and pull it out. Now, I have a check valve tool, and that's what I'm going to use. If you don't have one, if you're going to rebuild only one stove, you might be able to get away with just the screwdriver, but if you are going to do this more than once, I highly recommend you get the check valve tool. And it looks like this. Okay, this guy's been here for over 60 years. Let's see if we can get it out. I assume it was. It might have been pulled out once, but... Okay, here we go. Oops. That was real hard, huh? Sometimes you get lucky. Okay, next comes a valve. The valve on a stove has a square top, and that is about ½ inch. A ½ inch wrench, you can get it on there. It's a little tight. The way I do it, and have always done it, is just by using a bench vise. Same way as a lantern, just put it upside down in there. A stove is usually a lot easier than a lantern because you have a little bit of leverage. You can, you're able to grab it and turn it a little bit better. So all I'm going to do is turn it in there upside down, and I'm going to turn it counterclockwise to unscrew it. And it's just that easy. So now I'm taking the valve out of the tank. Okay, so here's our valve and generator. It's good to rebuild this part because this is about $65 new. The next thing we're going to do is work on pulling out the valve stem and the generator. So I'm going to put this back in the bench vise, just like that. I want to start on the valve stem first because the valve stem has the cleaner needle on it, and I want to get it out of the generator so I don't damage anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my wheel back on, I'm going to back out the valve as far as I can and clean it off, and then I'm going to pull the valve nut and pull the entire valve stem out. Okay, now you can see that this shaft is nice and clean, so when I loosen the nut, I'll just be able to slide it right off. I'm also going to put this back on and hold this closed as I loosen this nut. The reason I want to do that is if I just turn this alone, you'll see the wheel move. We don't want that to happen because the threads of this nut are different than the threads on the valve stem, and if you do that, you can damage the valve stem's threads. So I'm just going to hold it closed while I take the nut off. There's our valve stem nut, and you can see down inside there's the old valve stem packing. I'll pull that out in just a minute here. Okay, but now we're going to pull the valve stem out of the, so I'm going to unscrew it, and here she comes. And there it is. Now if you can see that's the tip cleaner. That's what we'll go through the gas tip to keep it clean, and every time you open and close the valve, it moves in and out and cleans the gas tip. So for right now, I'm just going to put this in a box. I will disassemble this here in a few minutes. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is take off the generator housing, which is this large tube here. Piece of cake. Now out it came, and inside is going to be a spring. And you can see that this spring is consistent from left to right. There's no variations in the coil, so there's no concern about which direction it goes back in like there is sometimes on a lantern generator. Okay, there is another part of the generator here I want to take apart, and that is the gas tip protector. That's this part right here. So I'm going to put the Okay, there's our gas tip protector, just a cap basically, and what it does is it holds the gas tip on. And there's our gas tip. So if you can line that up, you should be able to see through it. Okay, back to the valve. The last thing we have to take apart here is the fuel and air tube. And I'm just going to loosen it. I don't want to take it off because we're not going to actually pull the metering rod out of it. It doesn't come out. So this metering rod is going to stay affixed to the valve. It does not come out. So I don't want to bend this right now. I'm just going to put it back in there loosely, and we'll come back to it when we clean it. This part right here, as long as there is some resistance to you turning it, you do not have to replace it. If you do have to replace it, make sure you have one first, and because when you pull this thing out, you're going to destroy it. Okay, and the last thing we have on the valve is the old valve stem packing. And I'm just going to take a screwdriver and I'm going to break it out of there. And I'm not going to hurt the threads or anything, so I can lean on it a little bit, and it's okay. Okay, now you should be able to see down in there. Okay, the last thing we need to do is take the valve stem and separate it from the generator stem assembly. I'm just going to take a pair of pliers and grab the stem gently, and then I'm going to unscrew it from the valve stem, just like that. Okay, now if I bend this thing, I'm going to have to replace it, so I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is, while it's in its box, I'm just going to set it inside of its spring for protection, just like that. And there we go. There is our complete tank in pieces and ready to be cleaned. Okay. The stove case. They're all different, and the differences in the cases are usually that the way the lid comes off of the case itself, and then the way the grates come off the case. This can really be a pain, and we'll go through this as I show you, but when we get to the grates, I'll have to show you another stove too, because it's really odd. Okay, so on this particular stove, the first thing I want to do is take the lid and get it out of my way. So I'm going to start disassembling it, and I'm just going to set it aside. I do have another box, and we'll put the smaller parts in the box when we disassemble it. Okay. If you can see inside of here, Coleman did this an awful lot with their stoves. And there's going to be a little flat nut back here, and then screws on the other side, and all I got to do is release all of these screws. This holds the grate right here, and you can see the screw holes coming in here. That is actually that one, and the one over here is going to hold on our lid. So I'm going to get a Phillips head screwdriver and go after all those screws. They look like that. Just a little clip, and stove's full of them. Okay, there's our lid. Okay, same thing with the grates. Okay, so I have the screws for this grill pulled off. Now these clips are kind of elongated and they rotate kind of funny, so I'm just going to mess with them for a second here to get them to do what I want. See how they're shaped? They're kind of weird. Rusty and nasty and greasy. And boy, you can see all the grease on that. And it takes some work to get that clean. But we will. Okay, so while I'm pulling the grates out of that 426B, let me discuss this, because I know some of you are looking at your stove saying he's out of his damn mind. I have these little clips on here and I can't get them out. There's no screw or anything. Well, it would be a disservice to you if I didn't show you this. They're really difficult to deal with. I have no idea why Coleman did them. Actually, this is what one looks like. I still have one. You can't buy them anymore, but they're just a little U-clip and they got little tabs on them. And once you take this thing and you push it down in there, these little tabs catch on the back side of this lip and you almost can't get them off. Okay, so I'll show you a few ways you can get this off, and then I'll show you the way I prefer to do it. If you're strong enough, you can actually grab one of these arms and pull on it far enough to stretch these two out to separate it. This little 425, there's not a lot of room right here, so it's really hard to bend, and I'm not even going to try it. Second way you can do that is with a pair of channel locking pliers. You can grab right here and squeeze until you bend this far enough to release it. Those ways work, but I prefer to use heat because I know heat will turn metal into something like butter, and it's just really easy to do. So here's what I do. I don't want to hit the case with heat because I don't want to damage it. So I'm going to set this little prop up here so I don't damage my stove case. And then I'm going to apply heat to this area right here, because once it gets nice and hot, I'm going to grab it with a pair of pliers and I'm just going to pull it out, and then I'll be able to remove the grate. There she is. And of course, when I go to put it back in, all I have to do is put it back up on this stand, get it hot, grab it, bend it back in, and she will go right where she's supposed to. That's how you deal with those clips. Back to the 426B. Okay. Yeah. See, this is not a setup. I have not touched this stove. It's absolutely disgusting. Okay, so when you do stuff like this, it's always helpful to know somebody that might have part stoves and stuff, because you see whoever owned this stove before me lost the handle on it, and they put some rope on it, which is, you know, clever. Glad they did that. I happen to have a handle. That's what the used handle looks like. So I'm just going to throw it in the parts bin. Next thing we're going to take out is the burner. We turn that stove up on its side. You see the holes in the bottom here. If you look straight into these holes, you're going to see that there is a little powell nut back in there. And they're usually 7/16. So you take a 7/16 on your nut driver and you just put it in here and pull these powell nuts. Powell nut is just a hollow nut. It is usually used as a lock nut. So this one had one bolt holding the back of the manifold up, and then it had the three pound nuts. And now the burner can come out. This entire assembly is called a manifold, and that's what she looks like when she comes out. Now we're going to further disassemble this. You can see the large screws here in the burner bowls. I'm going to remove them. This will release the burner rings and the burner bowl, and they can all be cleaned before they're put back in. So when you take this apart, you're going to find that you have burner rings that look like this. Okay, now I'm going to take this little guy out. So now this is our manifold. This is the U-tube, and these are the interconnecting pipes of the other two burners, or your two auxiliary burners. And this assembly does come apart. It's all steel, so it rusts together and it'll really get corroded. It's really tough to do. If you're not able to get it apart, it's okay as long as you soak it and make sure everything's clean inside. I'm going to put some penetrating fluid on this and let it soak for a while. You can see that this burner box does come out. This one was nice and loose. So it's just, that's the connection. And it's just because they're so rusty. Sometimes it's hard to get them apart. Okay, the last thing we have to do is remove the legs on the case. This one, they just pop out. I have to lift them out like that. And there we are. We have a completely disassembled 426B. I'll give you a good look at how much grease there is in this guy. And yeah, we're going to have fun in the next video. Okay, so if you liked the video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. You can find me at oldtowncoleman.com. You can also follow me on social media at Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And until part 2, keep them burning.